Location: Midland, Texas. Time: Tuesday, July 25th, 2023, 5:45 p.m. The screen door slammed behind Alex, the sound rattling through the heavy stillness of the Texas evening. The sun hung low, casting long, golden shadows across the dusty yard. Beads of sweat rolled down Alex's temples, but it wasn't just the oppressive heat that had him on edge. The thought of spending another evening under Tessa's sharp gaze sent an uncomfortable prickling down his spine. From inside the house, her voice called out, smooth and honeyed, masking the edge that always seemed to accompany her words. "Alex, dear, can you come in here for a moment?" The garbage disposal's acting up again. His hand tightened around the handle of the toolbox he'd brought, a reluctant sigh escaping his lips. Maggie had left only minutes ago, her car kicking up a plume of dust as she drove down the long dirt road to town. She wouldn't be back for hours. The ranch house smelled the same as it always did, lavender and lemon, Tessa's signature mix. It was everywhere, clinging to the air, to the furniture, even to the faint sense of unease that settled in Alex's chest every time he crossed the threshold. In the kitchen, Tessa stood by the sink, her figure framed by the soft light filtering through the window. Her blouse, crisp and fitted, and her jeans, just a little too snug, didn't scream casual evening at home. Alex wondered if she dressed like this intentionally or if his mind was playing tricks on him. "I think something's caught in the blades," Tessa said, her tone light but her eyes heavy. He set the toolbox down with a thud, forcing his gaze to the disposal. "I'll take care of it." Crouching under the sink, Alex worked quickly, eager to finish and create some distance between them. The hum of the garbage disposal was the only sound, but Tessa's presence lingered behind him, closer than necessary. Her floral perfume filled the confined space, almost suffocating. "You know," she began, her voice breaking the silence, "I was telling Maggie just the other day how lucky she is to have a husband like you. So handy, so dependable." The wrench slipped in Alex's grip, the clang of metal against metal startling in the quiet. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice tight, his focus unwavering on the task at hand. "I mean it," she continued, her tone shifting to something softer, something almost conspiratorial. "It's rare to find a man like you these days." Alex straightened abruptly, wiping his hands on a rag as he stood. "The disposal's fixed. Just needed a reset." Tessa smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips that sent a cold shiver down Alex's spine. "You're a lifesaver, Alex. Maggie's lucky to have you." Her hand brushed against his arm, a fleeting touch that felt deliberate. "I'll get to the faucet," he said quickly, stepping back and reaching for his toolbox. As he walked to the bathroom, Alex's mind raced. This wasn't the first time Tessa had acted this way. Her lingering looks, her loaded compliments, they'd been there before, but always subtle enough to dismiss. Tonight, with Maggie gone and the house so eerily quiet, her demeanor felt different. The faucet was an easy fix, but Alex lingered, his nerves on edge. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, drawing closer. He tensed as Tessa's shadow appeared in the doorway. "I made some iced tea," she said, leaning casually against the frame. "Thought you might want a glass. It's hot as hell out there." He forced a polite smile, his hands busy with the wrench. "Thanks, but I'm good." "Suit yourself," she said, her eyes lingering on him longer than they should. When she finally retreated, Alex exhaled deeply, the tension in his chest loosening just a fraction. He finished the job quickly, determined to leave before the situation became any more uncomfortable. But as he emerged from the bathroom, a sharp crash echoed from the living room. He froze, his heart pounding. "Tessa?" he called out, his voice steady but cautious. There was no response. He stepped into the living room to find Tessa standing near the coffee table, her face pale. A shattered glass lay on the floor at her feet, iced tea pooling around the shards. "What happened?" he asked, his brow furrowed. She looked at him, her eyes wide, almost frightened. I thought I saw someone outside," she said, gesturing toward the window. By the barn. Alex moved to the window, peering out into the dusky yard. The barn door swayed slightly in the breeze, but there was no sign of movement. Probably just the wind, he said, though unease prickled at the back of his neck. Tessa stepped closer, her hand lightly touching his arm. Maybe, but it didn't feel like the wind. It felt like someone watching. Her words sent a chill through him, but he forced a reassuring tone. I'll check it out. He grabbed a flashlight from the utility closet and headed outside. The evening air was thick, the last rays of sunlight fading into deep twilight. The barn loomed ahead, its dark interior yawning open like a mouth waiting to swallow him. As Alex stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing stacks of hay bales and farm tools. Everything seemed in its place, but the silence was oppressive. He moved deeper into the barn, his footsteps crunching against the dirt floor. Then, just as he reached the far corner, something clattered behind him. He spun around, the flashlight trembling in his grip. "Hello?" he called out, his voice firm. No answer. He inched closer to the source of the sound, his pulse hammering in his ears. Just as he rounded the corner, a figure darted out from the shadows, fast and silent. Alex barely caught a glimpse. A man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured. "Hey!" Alex shouted, giving chase, but the figure was already gone, disappearing into the night. By the time Alex returned to the house, his nerves were frayed. Tessa was waiting by the door, her expression tense. "Did you see anyone?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Alex said, his tone grim. "But he got away." Tessa's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes darting to the window. "I don't like this, Alex. What if he comes back?" He didn't respond, his mind racing. Who was the man in the barn? And why was he here? As the shadows deepened and the night pressed in around them, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Location: Midland, Texas time. Tuesday, July 25th, 2023, 8:15 p.m. Alex sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cold glass of water. The encounter in the barn replayed in his mind, every shadow and movement dissected for clues. He hadn't seen the man's face, but something about his size, his speed. It felt deliberate. This wasn't just some drifter looking for shelter. Tessa hovered near the sink, her usual sharp confidence replaced by a quieter, almost anxious energy. She scrubbed at the same spot on the counter long after it was clean. "Are you sure you didn't recognize him?" she asked, her voice softer than before. Alex shook his head. No, he was fast, and it was dark, but he knew where to hide. It wasn't random. Tessa paused, her hand tightening around the dishcloth. "You think he's been here before?" "Maybe," Alex replied, watching her carefully. Tessa glanced toward the living room window, where the barn was a dark silhouette against the night sky. Her shoulders tensed. "We should call the sheriff." Alex hesitated. The thought of getting the authorities involved felt like crossing a line, but he couldn't put his finger on why. "Let's wait," he said finally. "If he comes back, we'll call. No sense stirring things up if it's a one-off." Tessa didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "If you're sure." As the evening wore on, the unease between them lingered like an unspoken accusation. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that Tessa was holding something back. Location: the ranch house, guest bedroom time. Tuesday, July 25th, 2023, 11:20 p.m. The house was quiet, but Alex couldn't sleep. He lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him. The events of the day looped endlessly in his mind. Tessa's behavior, the figure in the barn, the way everything felt just slightly off. A creak from the hallway snapped him out of his thoughts. He sat up, straining to hear. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, moved toward the back of the house. Alex swung his legs over the bed, pulling on his boots. Quietly, he opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the kitchen's nightlight. He followed the sound of the footsteps to the back door, which was slightly ajar. The cool night air seeped in, carrying the faint scent of hay and lavender. Alex stepped outside, his eyes adjusting to the moonlight. Tessa stood near the barn, her figure bathed in silver light. She wasn't alone. A man stood a few feet away, his posture rigid. Alex recognized the outline immediately. It was the same man he'd chased from the barn earlier. What the hell? Alex muttered under his breath, his heart pounding. He ducked behind a nearby tree, watching as Tessa and the man spoke in low, urgent tones. She gestured toward the house, her movements sharp and frantic. The man shook his head, his arms crossed. Alex strained to hear their conversation, but the distance and the rustling of the wind made it impossible. Tessa stepped closer to the man, her hand on his arm now. Alex felt a surge of anger and confusion. What was she doing? And why hadn't she told him? When the man finally turned and disappeared into the shadows, Tessa lingered for a moment, her head bowed. Then, she straightened and walked back toward the house, her face pale and drawn. Alex slipped back inside before she could see him, his mind racing. Location: the ranch house, kitchen time. Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 7:30 a.m. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light over the kitchen table. Alex sat with a mug of coffee, his expression guarded. Tessa bustled about, her movements too quick, her smile too forced. "You didn't sleep well," Alex said, breaking the silence. Tessa paused, her back to him. "Neither did you," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Yeah, I heard something last night," he said, watching her closely. "Want to check it out?" Her hand stilled on the countertop, but she didn't turn around. "Oh, yeah," he said slowly. "Saw you outside, near the barn." Tessa turned then, her expression perfectly composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? "I couldn't sleep either," she said with a small laugh. "Thought I'd get some air. The heat's been awful." "And the man?" Alex asked bluntly. Tessa's smile faltered. "What man?" "The one you were talking to," Alex said, his voice firm. "Don't lie to me, Tessa. I saw you." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a deep sigh, she set the dish towel down and faced him fully. "Fine," she said, her voice sharper now. "I wasn't going to tell you because I didn't want to make things worse, but he's my ex." Alex blinked, his confusion deepening. "Your ex? What the hell is he doing here?" "He showed up out of the blue," she said, crossing her arms. "Said he needed a place to stay for a couple of nights. I told him no, obviously. That's why he was in the barn. I didn't want him near the house." Her explanation sounded rehearsed, but Alex couldn't tell if it was because she was lying or because she was genuinely uncomfortable. "You should have told me," he said, his voice low. "I didn't think it mattered," she shot back. "I handled it. He's gone now." Alex wanted to believe her, but the knot in his stomach told him this wasn't over. Location: the ranch, barn time. Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 1 p.m. Later that afternoon, Alex decided to check the barn. Something about Tessa's explanation didn't sit right with him. The barn was quiet, the faint smell of hay and oil hanging in the air. He moved carefully, scanning for any sign of the man's presence. In the far corner, he found it, a small duffel bag stuffed behind a stack of crates. He unzipped it, his pulse quickening as he saw the contents: cash, a burner phone, and a handgun. Alex's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an ex dropping by unannounced. This was something far more dangerous. A noise from behind him made him turn sharply. Tessa stood in the doorway, her face pale. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex held up the bag. "You tell me." Location: Midland, Texas time. Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 1:05 p.m. Tessa's face turned ashen as she stared at the duffel bag in Alex's hands. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The barn felt smaller, the air charged with the weight of unspoken truths. "Care to explain this?" Alex demanded. his voice tight as he gestured to the cash, the phone, and the gun. Tessa stepped forward, her hands trembling. Alex, it's not what you think. Not what I think. He laughed bitterly. You said your ex was passing through. That he's gone. So, why the hell is his stuff still here? And why is there a gun? Her gaze dropped to the ground, her composure cracking. He's not just my ex, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Alex felt like the ground shifted beneath him. What are you saying, Tessa? She looked up, her eyes filled with desperation. He's involved in something dangerous. I didn't know how bad it was until he showed up here. He needed a place to hide. Alex, he said if I didn't help him, he'd... Her voice broke, and she clutched her arms as if shielding herself from an invisible blow. He'd what? Alex pressed, his anger softening as unease crept in. Tessa's voice was a whisper. He'd hurt Maggie. The mention of his wife's name hit Alex like a punch to the gut. His grip tightened on the duffel bag as his thoughts spiraled. You brought this into our lives? He hissed, stepping closer. You put Maggie at risk? I didn't have a choice. Tessa cried, tears streaming down her face. He knows things about me, things I can't let anyone find out. I thought if I kept him here for a few days, he'd leave. I didn't know it would go this far. Alex shook his head, his mind racing. We're calling the sheriff. You can't. Tessa grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. If you do, he'll come after Maggie. He's watching, Alex. That's why he was in the barn last night. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. The man hadn't just been hiding. He'd been watching, waiting for leverage. Location: the ranch house, living room time. Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 3 p.m. Alex paced the living room, the duffel bag sitting ominously on the coffee table. Tessa sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. You need to tell me everything, Alex said, his tone sharper than he intended. No more lies, Tessa? She nodded, her voice trembling as she began. His name is Neil. We were together years ago, before I met Maggie's father. He was charming, ambitious, and ruthless. When I found out he was running scams, I left him, but he didn't forget about me. He's been in and out of trouble ever since, and when he showed up here last week, he said he needed a place to lay low. I didn't know what to do. Alex clenched his fists, the urge to punch something barely contained. So, you decided to keep it a secret? What if Maggie had come back early? What if he'd hurt her? I thought I could manage it, Tessa said, her voice breaking. I didn't think he'd go this far. A loud knock at the door silenced them both. Alex exchanged a tense glance with Tessa before grabbing the gun from the duffel bag and tucking it behind his back. He opened the door to find Neil standing there, his face calm but his eyes cold. Mind if I come in? Neil asked, his tone too casual. Alex stepped aside, his jaw clenched. Neil strolled in, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on the duffel bag. Looks like you found my things, he said, his lips curling into a smirk. What do you want, Neil? Alex demanded, his hand twitching toward the gun. Neil's smile faded, replaced by a steely glare. What I've always wanted, cooperation. I need a little more time to handle some business. After that, I'm gone, and you'll never hear from me again. And if we say no? Alex asked, his voice low. Neil chuckled darkly. You won't, because you know what's at stake. Location: the ranch, back porch time. Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 6 p.m. The tension was suffocating as Alex and Neil stood on the back porch, their conversation punctuated by the distant hum of cicadas. I don't trust you, Alex said bluntly. Neil leaned against the railing, his smirk returning. Smart man, but trust doesn't matter. Survival does. As Neil spoke, Alex's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from Maggie. Heading home soon. Love you. A surge of determination coursed through him. Maggie couldn't walk into this mess. Alex's voice was calm but firm. You need to leave. Now. Neil's expression hardened. That's not how this works. But Alex was done playing games. In one swift motion, he drew the gun and leveled it at Neil's chest. "You've already pushed your luck," Alex said, his voice deadly. "If you're here when Maggie gets back, I swear I'll end this." Neil raised his hands, his smirk faltering. "Easy there, cowboy. No need to get dramatic." "Get your stuff and go," Alex said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Epilogue location: the ranch house, driveway time: Thursday, July 27th, 2023, 9 a.m. By the time Maggie returned, Neil was long gone. Tessa claimed he'd left on his own, but Alex suspected the threat of the gun had more to do with it. As Maggie unpacked the groceries, Alex and Tessa shared a tense, unspoken understanding. The events of the past days were a wound that would take time to heal, but for now, the immediate danger was gone. As the sun rose over the ranch, Alex resolved to protect his family at all costs. Shadows still lingered, but he wouldn't let them take root again.